Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael. I'm going to be your host for this afternoon's session. So we're looking at Sage 50 accounts, and specifically, it's the clear audit trail option that we're looking at. There are always a lot of confusion surrounding this option, what it actually does, how you go about running it, and if you are going to run it, when should you clear up to? So that's what we're going to try and get across today, hopefully explaining that in a bit more detail and answer any questions that you might have along the way. Now, session this afternoon, depending on questions that we receive, should last approximately maybe about 45 minutes. It's normally when we've run it in the past, that's normally in the region of the duration. So we'll try and stick to that. But again, it will depend how many questions we get during the session today. Now, just before we get stuck into the webinar, just a little bit of housekeeping so you know what's going to be happening. Obviously, I'll be doing the talking, I'll be running through some slides today. And I'll also be sharing my screen as well, so you'll be able to see me working in the software. So a live demonstration of clearing the audit trail. Now, during the session, your microphone will be muted if you have one. That will be done automatically and you can't unmute yourself. So any questions that you have for us today, it does mean that you need to type them into the questions panel. And to do that, to access it, you just click the little speech bubble icon, which is on the taskbar down the right-hand side of your screen. Give it a click. It will expand it and you'll have access to the box in the bottom right hand corner. So comments, questions, pop them in there. Do engage with us. Remember to click send as well. We've probably, if you use Teams, I'm sure you've all typed in a message and thought, why hasn't that person responded? And you go back and you think, oh, I forgot to click send. So do click send, otherwise we won't see it. We should have a couple of my colleagues on hand this afternoon to support you with those questions. You may get a link to maybe one of our help articles, or maybe a straightforward answer if it's a nice simple question you have. Or if it's a bit more complex, they might encourage you to get in touch with our support team. So we should be joined by Abby, Matt and Jackie this afternoon. They'll all be on hand to help answer those questions that you might have, just in case we get a bit of an influx. I'll be joining in with some of those along the way as well. If anyone wants a copy of today's slides that I'm going to be using, then they are available to download during the session. Do take that opportunity. They're not available afterwards. So just again, if you want them, give the little icon a click. Now, the slides aren't detailed by any stretch of the imagination. If you want the detailed sort of step-by-step guides, criteria, things like that, a bit more in depth than what I'm covering today, you will find that available from our help center. It should be nice and easy to find. And as normal, you will receive an email around about 1 hour after we finish. That email will include a link to a recording of this afternoon's session, but it will also contain links so you can register for our future webinars. And also, if you've missed any previous sessions as well, there'll be a link to our recordings page. So watch out for that one. Right, let's have a look at what we're going to be covering in today's webinar, though, for clearing audit trail. So first of all, we're going to start with the basics. What is clear audit trail? What does it actually do? What's the point of it, and why would you run it? We'll then get stuck into more behind the scenes, the criteria. So if you are going to clear your audit trail, what's the criteria for transactions to be cleared from that audit trail if you run through that option? We'll look at steps for preparing. So how can you get the most benefit from it? So what do you need to do to your transactions to make sure as many of those transactions can be cleared as possible? We'll obviously run through a demonstration so you can see what that looks like. It's a really simple process, the clearing audit trail, just a little simple wizard. But then once we've run through that, and this is always a common question, this one, why haven't my transactions cleared? So you may find that some clear and some don't. It'll come back to that criteria that we're going to discuss in sort of section 2. So we'll have a look at some of the transactions that remain on my list and have a look at, see if we can track down why they haven't cleared. And then just at the end, just to explain more about the additional support that's available, give you an idea of some of those webinars we've got coming up as well. Remember that link will be included on your follow-up email and the recording will be there as well. And obviously if there are any outstanding questions at the end, we'll try and pick those up as well. So let's get stuck in and we'll dive straight in with Clear Audit Trail and what it actually does. Now, just to set the scene a little bit, there is While there isn't a hard limit on the number of transactions that you can enter into Sage, so it's not going to just, you hit a certain number and it's going to stop. But there is a recommendation, and that's 250,000 transactions. So some of you will be nowhere near that. Some of you may be well over and maybe approaching that. Some of you may even beyond that. So there is that recommendation these days, those of 250,000 transactions. So the idea of clear audit trail is that you can remove transactions from your audit trail. When I'm talking about the audit trail, we're talking about your transactions list. So where it lists all of the invoices and the bank payments and the receipts and the supplier payments and the credits and your journals. So all of those transactions on your transactions list, that's your audit trail. So the transactions that appear on your customer activity, your supplier activity, your nominal activity, your bank activity, all those transactions. Basically, you have an opportunity to clear those transactions. So clearing your older ones, and you will be able to specify a date. But there is criteria, and we'll cover that one in a bit more detail in just a moment. Now, when transactions are cleared from your audit trail, to maintain the balance against each nominal code, if, let's say, more debits than credits are cleared, what it will do is it will post an opening balance journal. Now, this only happens against nominal codes and bank accounts. It doesn't happen on customers or suppliers because of the criteria, but it is possible it can happen on nominal codes. So if more debits than credits are removed, for instance, to maintain that balance, it will post an opening balance for the difference. It will also create an audit trail history as well. So you do have that sort of a list where you can run a report on the transactions that have been cleared. Now, common questions relating to clear audit trail. And I want to get some of these out the way just so we don't get inundated with questions throughout. And I'm sure we will get loads of questions relating to these as well. But first of all, have you got to clear the audit trail? Now, as I mentioned, there's no hard limit to how many transactions you can enter, but there is that recommendation of 250,000. But clearing your audit trail is something that's optional. You don't have to do it. If you do want to run it, when would you run it? Well, you can run it at any time. So that links in with how often should I run it as well. You can run the clear audit trail option at any time. There's no restriction on that. You could run it multiple times as well if you wanted to. But normally, if you're going to clear the audit trail, you would normally do it after, maybe as part of clearing up your accounts, maybe as part of or just after you run that year-end process. But if you run your year-end and you think, well, I forgot to do that, don't worry, you can still go back and do that at any time. Pros and cons. Now, I'll pick up on the downside first of all. Clearing your audit trail means that you're removing your history from your accounts. And yes, you would take a backup beforehand, and you would take a company archive probably beforehand as well, just so that you've got copies of all that information should you need to refer back to it. However, in your live company, you might think, well, actually on a day-to-day basis, I don't need transactions listed in there from 5 years ago. I never refer to it. Now, only you will know how far back you want your live data to list that information for. Now, yes, there are HMRC requirements, but that's the purpose of maybe your company archive, so that if needed, you've got those records, you've got them stored in an archive that you can refer back to if you need to. But in your live data, you probably don't need to refer to that on a daily basis, if ever. Pros-wise, or the positive side of clearing your audit trail, is that obviously the less data you have, the more efficiently your software is going to run. So if you had 1,000 transactions and you ran a report, obviously you would expect that to be a lot quicker than someone that's got, say, 200,000 transactions. So the less data you have, the more efficiently your software is going to run. Obviously, there's less information for you to filter through. Reports will be that bit quicker. Your backups will be that bit smaller. Reports, checking your data should be quicker as well. So processes like that, they're going to run much more efficiently and hopefully be a little bit quicker and save you a little bit of time here and there as well. So there are benefits, but obviously you do lose that history from your live company. So we'll be coming back to that in a bit more detail a little bit later on, and you'll see as we're working through, hopefully you'll understand a little bit more about that. Now, let's say you are wanting to, or you're thinking about clearing your audit trail. There is certain criteria that your transactions have to meet before they can be cleared. So when you're working through the wizard, the first thing it's going to ask you for is, when do you want to clear up to? So we'll pick up on that in a bit more detail in a moment as well. So you'll specify a date during that wizard. It's not just going to look at everything and say, right, we're going to clear what we can. You will specify a date when you run through that wizard. So transactions must be on or before the date you specify. I suppose that's the core bit, or the core criteria that needs to be met. Now, what you will find as well is that you can't clear your audit trail to a date within your current financial year or even beyond it. It's got to be prior to your current financial year. What you tend to find is that obviously you'd always want to keep your current year and any future transactions, but historically, how far back do you need your live information that you need to refer to maybe on a daily basis? So commonly people will keep the current year plus maybe the previous financial year, but that will vary depending on between different types of business. Transactions must be marked as fully paid. So if it's an invoice, it must be fully paid. If it's part outstanding or fully outstanding, it will not clear it. It's got to be bank reconciled if it's a bank transaction. If it's VATable, it's got to be VAT reconciled, so it must have been included on a VAT return. If it's a CIS transaction, if anyone uses the CIS module, then again, the transaction must be CIS reconciled. And if you use the charities option within the software, and you've got the transaction, if it's flagged as a gift aid transaction, then it must be flagged for gift aid as well. So it must be gift aid reconciled. Now, where transactions are allocated together, so let's say you've got an invoice and you've got a payment or receipt against it, then all the linked transactions must meet that criteria as well. So I've got a quick example of what I mean by that, just to try and spell it out a little bit. So here we've got an example where we've got an invoice, a sales invoice. It's dated December 2022, it's £100. Doesn't need to be bank reconciled because the invoice itself isn't a bank transaction, but it's VATable, so it needs to be VAT reconciled. And as it happens in this example, it is. The receipt against that one is dated January 2023, so in the following month. Again, for the full amount, it's not bank reconciled. It's not a VATable transaction in this case. It's the invoice that's VATable, not the receipt. Obviously, that can vary depending on your VAT schemes as well. So in this instance, if we were to clear the audit trail to the end of December 2022, then the invoice would meet that criteria, but it wouldn't be cleared because the receipt doesn't meet that criteria. So the receipt that's allocated against it doesn't meet that criteria. Therefore, neither transaction would be cleared. So that's something to bear in mind when you've cleared your audit trail and you think, well, why hasn't that one gone? Then it's probably to do with an allocation. But again, we'll come back to that one a little bit later on. Now, what Clear Audit Trail doesn't do, it doesn't delete your old records. It doesn't get rid of any customers. It doesn't get rid of your supplier records, any nominal or bank records. We are running separate webinars on those, but you will only be able to delete those types of records if they've got no activity. And the way that you get rid of that activity is clearing your audit trail. It also doesn't impact on your products and your service records or the transactions against those. It doesn't delete invoices from your invoices list or credit notes or quotations list. Or if you're on the professional level, it doesn't remove old orders either. So it's all about those transactions in your transactions list that appear on your customer, supplier, nominal and bank activities. Those are the transactions that are impacted by Clear Audit Trail. Now, again, if you've got any questions, if you did join us late and you're thinking, well, I'm not sure about that one, or maybe you want some clarification on something, pop your question or your comment in there. You just need to click that little speech bubble icon on your taskbar down the right, and then start typing into the box at the bottom. Right, okay. Little flurry of questions there. So as I say, we've got a few of my colleagues on hand today. So we've got Abby and Matt in the background. They'll be trying to pick those questions up for you. A quick question from Peter there. I'll pick that one up. So Peter's just asking, mentioning that he's under the turnover limit for VAT registration, so not VAT registered. Do you need to do something to reconcile VAT on the transactions before clearing your audit trail? If you're not VAT registered, sorry, you wouldn't have entered your transactions with VAT in the first place. So what you'll tend to find is that when you're entering, let's say you are charged VAT, so let's say it's £100 plus £20 VAT, what you'll be doing is you'll be keying it in as £120 in the net column, and then you'll be entering that as a T9. So in your case, that transaction wouldn't be classed as being VATable. So it's £120 invoice. So in that case, you wouldn't, excuse me. So in that case, if you clear your audit trail, it does need to be VAT reconciled. It's not classed as being a VATable transaction. Hope that makes sense for you there, Peter. Right, what we'll do though, we'll move on. We'll have a quick look at the criteria. Sorry, we've already picked up on the criteria. We'll have a quick look at the preparation steps. So if you are going to choose to clear your audit trail, how can you get the best from it, make it most effective, and get rid of as much as you can? Well, there's a couple of things you can do. Obviously, we'd always recommend that you check your data. Make sure you back up your data as well, because you are going to be removing information. Now, you will be prompted to take a backup during the clear audit trail process itself. But there's also an option where you might want to think, right, well, actually, I want to archive my data. Now, if you're running the clear audit trail immediately after running your year end, then you wouldn't need to create another archive. It probably would have created that archive as part of that year end. Now, mention there as well, print your reports. What information do you want to retain about potentially information that's going to be removed from your live company? Allocate your transactions together. So do you have an invoice and maybe a credit note on the same account? You've probably got loads of them. Might be an invoice and it might be a payment on account where someone's paid you in advance if you're raising the invoice. So allocate everything together. Remember, if you've got an invoice and you've got a credit and they're not matched, both transactions are going to be flagged as being outstanding. So they're not going to be flagged as having been paid. Therefore, if you go to clear your audit trail, it will not clear them because the transactions don't meet that criteria. So it may just be a case of tidying up your customers and your suppliers by allocating transactions together. Reconcile your bank accounts, or if maybe you've got certain bank accounts that you just think, well, actually, there's not a lot of activity on there. I don't want to reconcile them. So you can actually switch off that reconciliation option. I'll just quickly show you this one. If I pop back across to my screen, and if I pop into bank accounts, and we'll just pick on this one, this bank deposit account. I've got a balance against it, but if I double click it, what we can do is, if we haven't got much activity against this one, and maybe we don't receive a statement either, so what we can do is we can just say, well, actually, we don't want to reconcile that one. There's not enough activity against it to make it worthwhile. So you could come in and you could tick that box, and you've got that option against each of your bank records as well, by the way. So you've got that as an option as well. And then the final option, if I just pop back to the slides, just before we get stuck into the demonstrations. is to reconcile your VAT return. Now, it's not as common these days because of making tax digital for VAT, certainly in the UK. So everyone generally generates the VAT return within your software these days. So what used to happen before making tax digital was introduced by HMRC is that people would just leave that to their accountant. They would take a backup and send it off to their accountant, and the accountant would do the submission for them. So actually their transactions in their accounts weren't actually flagged as VAT reconciled. If you've got old transactions, maybe you were in that position previously, but you now do your VAT return, it could be that you've got these transactions from years ago, which were never included or not flagged as reconciled because your accountant did it at the time. So what you might want to do is do a dummy VAT return just for that old period so you can flag those transactions. If you need a little bit of advice on that one, do get in touch with our support team and they can have a look at that with you. But to make it as effective as possible, you want to, again, make sure you allocate your transactions together to tidy up those customers, reconcile your bank accounts, and also reconcile maybe your old VAT periods if you haven't done that in the past. Right, what we're going to do then is, I think we've talked enough about it, so what we'll do is we'll get stuck into a demonstration. It's quite a short demonstration, this one, because there's not a lot to see. It's a simple wizard. A couple of tips though before we go into that though. Things to really think about. First of all, are you sure? Are you sure you want to do it? Remember, it's an optional task. I can't stress that one enough. If you're not sure that you want to clear the audit trail or not, then just don't. Remember, it's optional. You don't have to. But again, the benefits is that by removing some of that older information, you can gain a little bit of a sort of efficiency and maybe speed as well. So are you sure? If in doubt, just don't. Second point is, when do you want to clear up to? So how far back do you need your live data to go? Obviously, you've always going to have your current financial year, but prior to that, how far back do you need it to go? Do you need to go 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, more? Remember, if you need historical information, if you've created an archive, you could always refer to that. Now, we are running some webinars on company archives. If you're not really sure about company archives, how you create one, etc., I'll be just going to be running you through that on Thursday. And there will be a repeat of that session as well. Not sure the date of that one. But again, it will be on the live webinar timetable if you are interested in attending. So again, just to recap, 2 things to think about. Are you sure? If so, when do you want to clear up to? The amount of times I've dealt with customers in the past where they clear up to a certain date and then guaranteed within a couple of days you think, oh, I've got a query from a customer, or I need to query something on a supplier account. Actually, I've deleted some of that history because I've cleared that information from my live company, and then you're referring back then to an archive. Anyway, we'll get stuck in. I'll switch back across to my screen and we'll quickly run through a bit of a demonstration. Now, as we can see, if I go to help and then about, it's going to load. We'll just scroll down a little bit. You can see in the data information area here, this is the key bit of information here is the splits number. So I'm not going to go into headers and splits in detail or usages for that matter, but splits. So that's the number of transactions you've got. And if you've never cleared the audit trail, what you'll find is that splits number, it agrees with this number in the bottom right-hand corner. So essentially, that's your transaction number at the minute. So this is the last transaction number at the bottom. This is how many transactions you have. So 5,087. You may find that the two differ once you've cleared your audit trail. So if you're unsure about how many you have, that's where you'll find it. You could, of course, just pop into transactions as well, and you can see what number it goes up to. Right, what I'm going to do then, I'm going to pop into tools. Now, to clear your audit trail, you will need your colleagues to be out of the software as well. It's what we term an exclusive program request, this one. So it means that everyone else needs to be logged out of this company. If you've got multiple companies that can be working away in other companies, but they need to be out of the one that you're working in. So pop into Tools, Period End, and then the first option there is Clear Audit Trail. Just tells me it's going to close on any other windows that I've got open, so yes to that. And it launches the Clear Audit Trail wizard. So it gives you a little bit of information. So the information about the criteria that I covered earlier, obviously I give you a little bit more detail than what it shows that on here. But the key here is you've got to enter a date. Now what should pick up, or it should pick up the date, which is prior to the start of your previous financial year. That's the default. So in my case, you'll probably see at the bottom here, my financial year starts January 2024. So it covers the calendar year in my example. Let's say I want to keep all of that year. I want to keep all of 2023. So let's say I'm happy with this. Now, obviously, I don't have to run it up to the end of a financial year. You know, if I wanted to, I could do the 10th of October 2022, for instance. So you can specify whatever date you want, but it must be prior to the start of your current financial year. So I'll just accept that. Now, if there are bank accounts that maybe you haven't reconciled or you haven't reconciled for quite some time, it will prompt you. Now, this is the one where I think, well, do I want to turn off the bank reconciliation for this one? Yours might not list any if you reconcile them regularly. If you've never reconciled, then it's going to probably prompt you with all of your bank records. So with this one, I'm thinking bank deposit accounts, maybe I don't use it much. Again, I want to maybe remove as many transactions as I can, so I'll tick that box. So essentially going into the bank record, ticking that little box to say, actually, I don't want to reconcile this one. So all I've really done here is I've just accepted that date. I'm ready then just to click Clear Audit Trail. Mal, you just mentioned there, if you turn off the bank reconciliation within the Clear Audit Trail, can you then turn it back on later on? Yes, but bear in mind, because I've ticked this box, if I then want to go and reconcile account 1210, then maybe some of the transactions have been removed from that account because I said, actually, I don't reconcile it. I'm not interested in reconciling it, so I've turned the option off. So you might lose some of the history from that account if you do then want to start reconciling. Something you still have the opportunity to do going forward. So if you think, well, I haven't reconciled so far, but actually from the start of my new financial year, I'm going to start using that option. So you can go back into that back record and take the ticks out if required. Right, we're going to click Clear Audit Trail at this point then. I'm prompted to take a backup. I've got to do that. If I cancel out, it just tells you must back up your data to run this option. So I do want to create a backup. Now, I'm only going to include my data files in this one, and I'm going to give it a file name. And I'm going to call it before Clear Audit Trail. And I'll put in today's date, so we'll do 07/01. If I remember, it is 2025 now. But give it a bit of a description, whatever you want to call it, just so you can recognize that. Location, choose where you want to save your backup to. I'll just pop mine on my desktop, and then I'll click OK. Now it does prompt you as normal, would you like to check your data before you back up? Now it's really quick on mine, so I am going to click yes. I would always encourage you to click yes to make sure your data is all right. It tells me there's no problems on that, so we'll just OK it. If you did have any errors, warnings, comments, just click on the options down the side here, and it will give you more detail about the error, warning, or comment, what it is. And then you've got the help option at the top, which will give you more information about what that error warning or comment means and what you need to do about that. But nothing to worry about on mine, so I can close out of that file maintenance area, and then it'll take my backup. Again, really quick on mine. I've only got just over 5,000 transactions, so next to nothing. I'll click OK. Now that's the backup, the check date and the backup done. Got a little bit of a progress bar here. Again, yours might take a little bit longer. If you've got hundreds of thousands of transactions, just let it run through. Go and have a cuppa. Just let it run, literally. Now, what it's saying for me is when it's finished, because mine's again really quick, it's telling me 1,268 transactions have been removed from my audit trail. Would I like to view the details of that? I can if I want to. Just tick the box. So I can click OK to that one. It generates a report. You might want to print it out. You might not. You might just save it. Maybe export it and save it as a PDF. I might just save that on the desktop. Give it a file name, whatever you want to call it, and save it. Just if you need it, you've got a copy of it. I'm just going to close out though. Now that's it done. I am back to that Clear Audit Trail wizard. So that's the process, really simple. So just to confirm where we went there, we went to Tools, Period End, Clear Audit Trail. Now in case you're looking and thinking, well, looks a little bit different now, it doesn't have the information about the bank account at the bottom because I ticked that box and now no bank accounts are in that position where I need to switch off the bank reconciliation or anything like that. So wizard's a little bit, the window is a little bit shorter now. Again, I could go in and you might think, well, I've tried clearing the audit trail. Certain transactions haven't cleared. I've gone in, I've started allocating transactions now. I've done a bit of tidying up, forgot about certain transactions, and then, excuse me, you know, you've done a bit of tidying up on the transaction. You think, right, I'll run it again. So you can come in and you can do this time and time again if necessary. But I'll close out. Now, for those of you with an eagle eye, you might think, oh, Michael's got more transactions now than he started with. My transaction numbers go up to a higher number now, but actually I'll have less transactions. The reason they've gone up is that, remember what I said, that if there are certain nominal codes where more debits are removed than credits or vice versa, it may need to post an opening balance for the difference. So that's what's happened. It's actually posted some additional transactions to the end of my audit trail. But if I pop into help and then about, and we just, again, this data information, you'll now see that my splits, rather than it being 5,086, is that the right number? I'm sure that's what it said earlier. I've now got 3,864 transactions. So again, that 1,200 odd transactions that it had removed, it's reduced the transaction numbers. I can see on here as well, just in case you're ever thinking, well, have I ever cleared the audit trail before? I don't know. On the left here, it actually tells you clear audit trail date. So you can see when we last cleared the audit trail up to. It'll just say N/A if that's never been done. So that's clear audit trail in a nutshell. So it was just tools, period end, clear audit trail, specify your date. You may have those little tick boxes at the bottom relating to your bank, but other than that, you're going to click clear audit trail. You'll be prompted to take that back up. I would recommend you check your data at the same time. It'll prompt you for that one. And then once it's done, it'll run through that wizard, clearing those transactions. So quick question from Debbie there. So from an accounting point of view, where does the opening balance go to? So Debbie, if you think about, let's say we got against a specific nominal code. So let's say we've got £100 worth of debits and £80 worth of credits. If it clears all of those transactions, it would mean that you're going to be left with an imbalance. So what it would do, it would just post an opening balance for that difference. It's going to get rid of the transactions that make up the debits and the credits, and it'll just post that balance for the difference. If I just pop into my transactions, you'll see, I think it's because I had balances on here in the first place for opening balances, but we've got it should all balance what it basically gets rid of. So these opening balances are posted with that date that you've chosen to clear up to against the relevant nominal code, and it posts that journal for the difference. So essentially replacing possibly multiple transactions with one for the difference between the debits and credits. Right, let's quickly pop back to the slides for a moment. So let's say you've cleared your audit trail. Probably the next most common question, other than how do I clear my audit trail or when should I clear up to and how do I do it, is, right, well, I've done that, but why haven't my transactions cleared? I've still got some on there which are dated prior to the date that I chose to clear the audit trail up to. So there's a great article within our help center. Why is clear audit trail not removed some transactions? I'm going to run through the basics of that, which is going to be a little bit of a recap on that criteria that we mentioned at the start. But things to look at, make a note of the transaction number. That's probably the easiest thing. So if you're looking in a customer account, you think, well, why hasn't that cleared? Make a note of that transaction number. Get into the transactions list. Again, run through that criteria that we mentioned earlier. But then you might think, well, actually it meets all that criteria. Do all of the linked transactions, get my tongue tied there, do all of the linked transactions, do they meet the criteria as well? But our Help Center article will guide you through that process if needed. But just as a quick example, I'll go back to my screen. And what I'll do is I'll go right to the very top of my transactions list. So actually I've still got transaction number 1, which in my case is it's a sales invoice. So why hasn't that cleared? It's dated in 2014. So Gwyneth, you mentioned 2014 in your comments before. I've got an earlier one than you. So I've got a transaction here, 2014. Well, it's prior to the date, it's an invoice, but why hasn't it cleared? So again, think about that criteria that we mentioned earlier. So first of all, date, well, we know it's prior to the date we specified. Is it paid? Well, actually, the paid column's got an N, so this transaction is still flagged as being outstanding. So this is where you might find, actually, well, we've got a credit note on that customer's account also for the same value, but you haven't allocated them together. So the two transactions are still, essentially, they're still outstanding in your accounts. They just need to be married up. So have a look at that information. Let's go a little bit further down the list and we'll find some others. See if we've got anything a bit more recent. So let's just pick on this one. So again, this one is dated, it's an invoice. It's dated in 2021. So again, it was prior to the date that we've chosen to clear the audit trail up to. If we just scroll along, we can see in the paid column, it's got an N indicating it's not fully paid. Obviously, you've got other columns in here as well. So bank reconciled. Obviously, it's an invoice, so this one doesn't need to be bank reconciled. If it was a bank transaction, it would need to have an R against it or a dash, indicating it has. So check that criteria. If you can't work it out, do check out that information on our Help Center article though. There is a report included that you can download where you can run that and it will check your transactions and it will give you an idea of why they haven't been removed. And if all else fails, do get in touch with obviously our support team. They'll have a look. They can have a look at that with you. So let's have a quick recap though. So on those common questions, have you got to? No, you don't. It's optional. When you're going to run it? Well, if you choose, you think, well, it's right for me, then probably just after you run year end. That's probably the most common time to run that, but it could be any time. How often? Well, you might run it just after you run your year end, but maybe in 6 months' time you think, well, actually, there were certain transactions that didn't clear at the time. I'll now clear up to, like in my example, I'll make it to July this in 2025, and I think, well, actually I'll clear up to the end of 2022 again. I'll give it another go. So I'm trying to get rid of as much of that history as I can. So that how often, it's entirely up to you, but you tend to find people run it once a year if they're going to run it. Pros and cons, obviously, downside is you are removing history. If you need that history, then make sure you've taken that archive. Make sure you've got a backup as well. Again, company archives, Abby's going to be covering that in detail on Thursday. Get yourself signed up for that one if you haven't already. But the positive side of clearing Audit Trail is that it does reduce your data. It reduces the number of transactions, so reports are going to be quicker, backups are going to be smaller. Checking your data should be quicker because there's less information for it to check. But only you can decide that. Right, now it does bring us to the end of the demonstrations. So if you've got any final questions, I think we're just about on top of those at the moment, do pop them in there. So you just need to click that little speech bubble icon. Help Center, loads of information in there. Now you can access the Help Center at any time, either within your software, you can just press F1. In a certain screen, you may find that you have a help option, top right-hand corner. Or you can literally open your browser and go to sage.co.uk/help. There's guides in there, webinars, you'll find videos in there as well. And if you can't find what you're looking at, it will prompt you to get in touch with our support team. It'll give you the options for getting in touch with those as well. Now, just to make you aware, we are running our next badging series of webinars. That will be from the beginning of February, and we're going to be looking at the banking area of the software. So again, when you get your follow-up email, do check out the registrations page. So we're running a series of, I think it's 9 different banking topics. If you want to earn your digital badge, I think you need to attend 7 of those. Just to qualify for that badge, but you'll find all the details on sage.co.uk/webinars. So again, do watch out for that one. If you're looking to maybe go for a more of a one-to-one training option, we do offer that now as well. That could be on anything. It's be totally tailored to suit your requirements. They are chargeable, the one-to-one bespoke training sessions. But if you are interested, whether it's you want to consolidate your knowledge for you, or maybe you and a number of your colleagues at the same time, it can be done on, you just want to consolidate your knowledge and develop that and your understanding on an existing area that you use. It may be a new feature. So if you're starting to look at CIS or sales orders, purchase orders, projects, anything like that, areas that maybe you aren't using just yet and you're looking to develop that. So if you are wanting to go down that route, all you need to do, I've included the link on the handout if you've downloaded the slides, is just drop us an email at uki.sageuniversity@sage.com. Set the ball rolling with that one. Now, just before I start joining in with questions as well, let me thank you for coming along. I hope you've enjoyed it and you found it interesting, and maybe it's given you a bit more food for thought. You might be going away today thinking, well, actually, I'm not going to do that. Great, at least you know what the Clear Audit Trail is about. If you're going away confused, then do remember you're going to get the recording, so we can have a bit of a recap on that one. But our support team is there as well if you need some additional advice on that. Now, as you leave today's session, there will be a little survey pop up. If you can take a minute to complete that, it'd be greatly appreciated. We love reading your comments and your thoughts. If you've got any ideas that you want to share with us, pop them on there as well. It's your opportunity to have your say. So have we hit the mark or not? So it should take you about a minute max. If you can do that, greatly appreciated. Follow-up email containing the recording to today's session, the link so you can register for our upcoming sessions, and also so you can watch other recordings as well. That will be with you in round about an hour's time. So watch out for that one. I'm going to quickly pick up on Anne's query from earlier as well. So Anne was just asking me to confirm. So if an invoice is outstanding at the time of completing Clear Audit Trail, but subsequently it's then paid during the following year, will it then be cleared? The answer to that one is no. It's only when you run through the Clear Audit Trail option that it will try and identify what transactions it can clear. You're not setting it up so where it's going to say, right, on an ongoing basis, I'm going to check now for invoices that are they paid and they meet the other criteria. It's not going to do that. You've got to purposely go through the Clear Audit Trail routine, and that's when it will try and identify what it can get rid of. And if it does meet that criteria, that's when it will clear it. So that's again why you might think, well, actually, I'll run it multiple times. So that question from earlier about how often should you run it? You know, if I get 6 months down the line, I think, well, actually, some of those invoices that didn't clear, they are now paid, and I want to get rid of them. I could run through that Clear Audit Trail again. Hope that makes sense. Sneha, your question there, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right there. Just mentioned what if we have usage data or about the data information. So usages and links and things like that, it's not going to remove that. So for instance, when we're talking about usages, for instance, we're talking about allocations, it will only get rid of an invoice if it can get rid of the corresponding credit note, payment on account, or receipt against it, and vice versa as well. It can't get rid of one without the other. So the allocation information behind the scenes, it's only going to get rid of that if it can get rid of both sides of the transactions. If it can't, then it won't do that. So it's not going to, you know, if you've got an invoice and a credit note both for £100, it's not going to get rid of the invoice without the credit. And again, vice versa. That goes for receipts and payments as well, where they're on customer and supplier accounts. Hope that makes sense. If not, drop me an email. So just reply to the webinar email. That will then be addressed direct to myself. I'll pick that up separately for you. Right, I think we're just about on top of the questions. So thanks to Abby and Matt for joining us in the background there, picking up those questions. You've kept them quite busy, I can see from the list there. So we'll end the webinar just at that point though. So do take that opportunity to complete the survey. As I say, it should take you a minute, Marks. We really appreciate it if you can. We love reading those comments. Any thoughts, ideas, topics you'd like to see covered going forward, pop it on there. Right, we'll end the webinar at that point. Watch out for your follow-up email and get yourself registered for those upcoming sessions as well. Many thanks, take care, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.